Yay! Hi everyone, I'm Catherine, aka the High Hill Gamer, and don't think that you're missing dates or anything like that. This is the Late Night Nerd Show on a Thursday. I had a little bit of technical difficulties yesterday, but we're here today. That's all that matters. I am super excited because I am with a very special guest who, unfortunately, I'm gonna butcher her name, but she is nice. So as long as I don't get yelled at, that's all that matters. So let's welcome Kamorian. I didn't say it right.
Yeah, you did.
Oh, I did. Yay!
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It's fantasy. You can
It's
butcher names all you want. It's all good. Said it to
her.
someone who had a word in their title for years and kept pronouncing it wrong. And I'm gonna keep pronouncing it wrong because it's fantasy.
It is. It is. I can never get like Game of Thrones, Lord of the Rings. Love them. Can never get any of the names right.
Mm-mm.
Never. Not even
You're
close.
not meant to.
Yeah, right? Exactly. But thank you so much for taking time to come on the show. I really do appreciate it. So you have a comic that's out. I'm gonna butcher the name of that too, and I'm so sorry. Ragnium Antiquium.
Yep. Give or
Hey,
take. Give or take.
she said,
Yeah.
so
I can't
tell,
I can't get that right either. So I
I
type it
love that.
out.
That doesn't make me feel bad. It's like, she created and she was like, yeah, it's fine. It's cool.
Mm.
So tell us a little bit about the story in the comic itself.
Well, it's dark fantasy mixed with some romance. Not a lot of romance, but some romance. Kind of apocalyptic, mythological. Yeah, I try to aim for something that's pretty. I try to aim for stuff that's pretty unique. There's themes that I really like and that I take inspiration from, but I want to mush it all together and make my own story. And that's kind of what this is.
Is this your first comic that you've actually worked on?
Uh, Officially, yes. That is a long, very long road and very long story. But a lot of people who've known me online see me bounce between different titles, but officially, this is my first.
And how does that differ from working on somebody else's project to working on your own? Do you find it tougher, about the same?
I really don't know. I haven't really collabed with a lot of people besides like my really nerdy friends back in high school. I like being my own boss. you know, uh,
Yeah.
I like. I mean, I wish I had like editor writer that can not necessarily bounce ideas off from, but I'm stupid when it comes to like writing or anything grammar. So I was like, I wish I kind of had somebody, but at the end, it's like this ending sucks. You need to change it. No,
Yeah.
no, I'm sticking with this ending, and no one can tell me otherwise. So I like working for myself. I like being my own creative director. It's a lot of hats, and sometimes I wish all of that load wasn't on my shoulders, but at the same time, boss life.
Yeah.
I like being in control of my own fate.
Yeah. No, I completely understand. It's a different beast, like, doing things on your own versus having to work for somebody.
Yeah.
Um, so what made you gravitate towards fantasy? Have you always been like a fantasy fan?
I've always been really nerdy growing up. When I was about 10 or so years old, I got a Nintendo 64. I got Mario. I mean, I grew up with a NES and SNES and played not small titles, but played a couple of titles, mostly Mario games. That's what was bred into our family, what I'd grown up with. But I got an N64 with Mario. And then one of my friends who had an N64 had Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. He played it and I fell in love. I went home and I'm like, I need this game. I fell hard for it, like big fantasy scapes. Now, I did not play the original three 2D games. Okay. So my first experience with Zelda was Ocarina of Time. and I fell hard. Like the fantasy world, like it's not modern day. It's, different races, different characters, a lot of lore.
Mhm.
Yes. So Ocarina of Time changed my life. You will see that a lot. You Google that, you'll see a ton, ton of stories. Ocarina of Time changed my life.
That's the starting point of it all.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
And which came are you also the artist and the writer of the comic?
hmm
So which came first, the art or the writing?
I really don't know. I grew up very craftsy, nerdy, artsy. I've always liked writing, coming up with stories. I've never been really good at writing because I have a learning disability, but I've always liked coming up with ideas and stories. And when I started getting more serious into art and stuff, and I found out about comics, every little piece or sketch, anything had to have a story behind it, and it was just natural. Like I saw a comic, and it was just like, I love this. I love it. It's my dream. I gotta
Do you
do
know
it.
which comic was it that was like, yes, this is it? No.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I can't remember the name of it, but that was a long time ago.
Do you still read comics now? Do you have time to read comics now?
I mostly like reading web comics, but I have some physical stuff. I'm mostly in the I read more manga. I
Oh,
grew up reading more manga, so I have some manga, but the comics that I do have, I mostly just base around indie and what my friends are doing, because I want to support them and see what they're doing and
mhm.
get some inspiration.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I'm reading too nowadays is a lot of indie stuff just because it's the stories tend to be fresher and newer and it's things
Yes.
that you haven't like read before with the, traditional comics as far as like Marvel and DC and stuff
Mhm.
like that.
Yeah.
So how did the story like come about? Was it like from a dream or were you
Um,
like playing a Zelda game and it was like, "Ooh,
no,
this could be a good story."
no. It's actually sort of like it's been a story that's been bouncing around like in my head for many, 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 many years. Um, it's sort of like a prelude to a much bigger title that I'm going to be working on. And it's always been like, oh, this happened, and this is why this world and these characters are the way they are today. And I've always had that idea. I've always played with that idea, but I never sat down and wrote it. And then one day I was like, yeah, I wanna develop it a little more. I wanna, write something small. And so I did. And then Webtoon, then I put it on the back burner for a little bit. I designed the main character, Amadeus, and then I put it on the back burner. And this was, it was the beginning of this year. And then Webtoon announced that they were going to have a contest, and I was like, "Oh, I got a short story. Why don't I push myself?" And I did. I pushed myself. Then I withdrew from it, developed the story a little bit more, and boom, here we are. It's on Global Comics now, and I am
Yeah.
so glad that I'm away from Webtoon and all that baloney. I'm not going to get in touch with it. I'm not going to go in deep with it, but it was too stressful.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can only imagine. I've heard stories. So what made you decide to do it as a web comic versus like a physical comic, or is it physical?
It's going to be physical.
Okay.
I've always had a struggle with just planning out printed traditional pages. I always had a problem with it. And then when I first found out about Webtoon and the vertical scrolling, I I really liked the format, and I really wanted to play with it. And I did. I played around with it. I studied, and I got fairly good at it. And I want my work to be as accessible as possible. and it is so hard. I do not like reading ebooks.
Mhm.
I don't like reading digital comics in the printed form. So when I found out about the vertical scroll, it to me it's a lot easier to read, and I like it a lot, and I wanted to utilize it so more people can read it as easy as possible. But at the same time, I want a published book. I want to hold that thing in my
Yeah.
hand. So I was like, well, I started building readership, and I'm like, hey, I'm thinking about a Kickstarter. And so those little voices started to trickle more and more and more. And I'm like, I'm doing it. Might as
Yeah.
well
I know it's something to, it's one thing when you see the comic and you're just like, okay, but when you
hold it.
different experience actually like being able to hold it. And I know this is gonna sound
Mhm.
crazy to those that don't read comics, but even the smell of it, it's like,
The paper
I did
smell.
this. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
A
we
lot of
ain't
people don't
crazy.
get that.
They don't
Yeah.
read.
But I'm the same way as you. Like I don't like ebooks. I've tried doing
Mhm.
the whole tablet reading thing. It's
Yeah.
just I just can't focus, as weird as it sounds, on like the virtual stuff.
Mm.
So that I completely understand what you mean by that. Um so you actually have a Kickstarter that's launching. When does it launch?
November 1st, Tuesday.
Right
It's
around the
coming up
corner.
Tuesday. Oh, yes. Yes.
So how excited. Is this your first Kickstarter?
Yes and no.
Oh, do tell.
I had a story that I actually did launch on Kickstarter a little over a year ago. It was called Anexios. Few people who've known me for a few years probably know what I'm talking about. I did create a campaign and I did start it, and then I was just not in the right mind space. And I felt like I didn't have a big enough audience yet. So I canceled it, but I learned a little bit, and a lot of people have been very supportive. So I dipped my feet into the water slightly, but I have not ran a full-fledged campaign. That's only because it was not the right time, it was
Mm.
not the right place. I feel very good about my work now. Like 2020, 2022, I started doing a bunch of illustrations, and I was like, oh gosh, my stuff just, I don't want to brag because I'm really not, but
Oh
it was
no,
just
do
looking
it,
really
brag.
good. It
Right.
was just looking really good. Like I would sit down and be like, I'm drew this. It just started looking really good. And I'm like, I think 2022 is going to be my year. And gosh darn it, it's going to be my year.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome. No, but you should definitely brag, I know we tend to be, harder on ourselves when it comes to like what we produce and what we make. I know I've spoken to a lot of artists that are like, my artwork isn't great, but
Mhm.
I think it's amazing. And I've seen your artwork and I think it is excellent. So you deserve definitely to brag about yourself and the work that you've done with it. You said this story is going to be a 5-issue arc. Is that correct?
Mhm. Yeah.
And are you going to try to do all of the books Kickstarter wise, or how are you or have you
Mhm.
thought that far ahead?
No, I have. I believe readership is very important. So, of course, I'm going to learn a lot after this campaign, but but going forward, I definitely want to post it online first. Not all of it, of course,
Mhm.
but post it online first, build that readership up, and then be like, hey, are we, depending on how well this campaign does, I still plan on publishing it online regardless, but I would
Okay.
love to have books and I would love to send it out to fans. I hate using the word fans. It feels one-sided, but I like to send it out to people who supported me and just really like the story. So I would like to continue down this path. And then Global Comics recently announced they were doing print on demand, and everything feels like it's fitting into place.
Do you feel like it's been a long time coming, or you're just like, yes, finally, like it's happening when I need it to happen?
I really don't know. I've been trying to publish webcomics since probably about 2006. So it feels like it's been a little bit of a long time coming, but a lot has happened in my life since then to get to this point. So now everything feels like it's starting to fall into place. I'm a huge believer in signs,
Mhm.
and I feel it. I really do.
That's awesome. I'm excited for you. Like I think that's also cool and it's perfect timing too. Like you said 2022 was your year and
Yep.
things are happening and then they announced this and it's like you kind of I don't know if you're feeling it but it's like did they do this just for me? Did they know this was my year so they're helping me out type of thing.
It's
I
like the
love how humble you
universe.
are.
You got to stay humble. Seriously,
No, I
you
love
got
it.
to stay humble. Yeah.
I love it because I mean of like uppity, cocky people, but I have run into uppity, cocky people at conventions and things like that. So just how humble and calm and cool and collected you are, I love that whole vibe. You've always been
I'm a
like this?
volcano. I'm a volcano on the inside. No, I grew up having really bad anxiety, and where therapy and medication really failed me pretty bad. I've learned to cope with it as much as possible, but like
Mhm.
I said, uh, this is just a show. Yeah.
No, I love it. It's great. It's really, really great. So, how did you decide that you were going to mix everything into the pot, as they say, as far as like fantasy and mythology and do the things kind of like outside of the box? Because a lot of the ways things are done, it's like, no, this is just fantasy. No, this is just mythology.
Well, honestly, this I always found like fantasy was meant to be outside of the box, growing up reading a bunch of like the school curriculum curriculums. Like the Odyssey and Ilium and all that fun Greek and Roman stuff. I really think fantasy was meant to break boundaries and be outside of the box and the norm. And growing up, a lot of people, that's all they read was like the superhero stuff, which superheroes, they come from like a lot of mythologies
Mhm.
too, and I don't really like superheroes. Please don't hate me, people. I'm not the
Well,
biggest fan of superhero. I grew up liking Spawn, and that's about as mainstream as I got because it
God.
was dark, he was angsty, and a lot of cool things that I liked. I'm not going to get any more into it, but people who know me well, like, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So what was your character of choice growing up if it wasn't like a superhero? What mythology character or we all know that you like Legend of Zelda, but what else were was influencing your sci-fi and mythology?
Oh, well, I grew up mostly, well, a lot of like the 80s and the 90s, like cartoons and anime, mostly anime. I still am, a big fan of Rankin and Bass. People probably may see it influenced in my work a little bit. I love Rankin and Bass. Um, the Last Unicorn is like a gorgeous piece. Um, and Thundercats. I loved Thundercats. I've always been a cat person. Hello, and Thundercats, and then animes. Oh, I'm not really highly influenced by Pokemon, but I watched Pokemon. That was the
Yeah.
'90s thing to do. Mostly Dragon Ball Z and Sailor Moon. More Sailor Moon than Dragon Ball Z, but I did take some stuff from Dragon Ball Z, but not a lot.
Just something, just the cool stuff.
Just a little. Like, I wouldn't be so interested and so good at anatomy if it wasn't for Dragon Ball Z. So that's it there.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
interesting. Like a lot of people, I've never heard anybody say Dragon Ball Z for as far as the anatomy. What was it exactly that you're like, I like the way is it the characters, the way they move?
No, just the way. It's just the way he stylizes muscles. Not really. the not really the way he draws women, but the way he really stylizes the men and their bodies. It's very statuesque, and I don't know. I really liked it, and I liked the shapes, and I was like, oh, this is cool. And that was some of the first things I used to draw. Was I would take screenshots of the anime or the manga, and I would replicate them, and I'm like, this is kind of cool. And I started to see those shapes too. And then more of the artist side of me was like, I really like anatomy, you know, like I really liked anatomy. And then I became a teenager, and then I really liked anatomy, as everyone knows.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Preaching to the choir. Don't even have to. And you know what? Your characters are really well drawn as far as like proportions. And I know that there's like armor and sword. Was any of that like difficult to try to? Was there any section of your artwork that you were like, yes.
Can you repeat that? Sorry,
Oh,
it glitched
sorry.
out. No.
Sorry. No, like, was there any part of your artwork that, within for your characters for this comic that you were like, "Oh, I'm having like a little bit of difficulty and I might need to practice this," or did everything just come naturally?
Oh, what I pushed myself with this was, first off, action. That was the biggest curriculum for the contest. Was it was supposed to be action, and so definitely pushed myself there. I felt like my expressions were a little stiff, so I wanted to push that a little bit more. And then, with the proportion and anatomy stuff, I've gotten notes from some friends that say, hey, just check this and that sort of stuff. Watch your arm anatomy, like how long it is. It looks a little short. Your legs. Yeah, I mostly drew characters from like pretty much the thighs up. So
Oh,
I've been trying to push
wow.
myself to do full bodies, just to dial in on anatomy a little bit more. And oh Lord, feet is the bane of almost every artist's existence. Feet. Still working on hands, but feet. So I'm just trying to push myself a little bit more, study a little bit, and just perfect it just a little bit here and there. And that's the amazing thing about working on a comic, is you improve so fast. You could do a ton of studies. You work on a comic, you grow very fast. Anyone who reads a comic, especially like a manga that's been around forever, like Dragon Ball Z, like you'll see Dragon Ball stuff when Goku was a kid, and then you start seeing it towards the middle or the end of Dragon Ball Z. It's like, yeah, you improve so much, and you push yourself, and you figure out, hey, what you like, what you're good at, what your strengths are. And yeah, you should try to fill in those weaknesses a little bit, but still flaunt the
Mhm.
strengths. I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
And as far as like the story goes, did you flesh out like the whole entire story or are you writing it section by section? How are you handling the story to break it up into
it's
these 5 books?
it's all written. It's
Wow.
it's all written. Well, when I mean written, I mean it's all outlined. I
Okay.
don't usually write in the sense of, oh, here's a paragraph, this is what they're doing. Oh, here's text, dialogue. That's not how I write. I mostly do everything in thumbnails, because I'm an artist first, and I've always
Got it.
been a visual learner. So
Okay.
it's more natural to me, but everything is in
Like storyboard.
outlined. Yep, exactly. Storyboard. Like, this is supposed to happen here, yada yada yada. So I know exactly how. We all know how it starts, but I know exactly how it ends. Like,
Okay.
to the T, to the word, how it ends.
So that must help actually break down like, okay, this is what goes into book one, this is what goes into book two.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah.
actually pretty cool. Like a cool, like I had talked to somebody, and they had said that they just do word vomit. They just write everything down, like whatever they're feeling for that moment, and just write everything down. And then they walk away from it, and then they come back, and then that's when they edit and stuff. But I find the way you're doing it like super interesting, as far as like storyboarding it. So how much room do you give yourself for the story underneath the picture?
A lot, a lot. I say as long as I am not inking it, I can change it.
Okay.
And I lie. Because there's sometimes where I will have panels where I have almost rendered, and I was like, oh, I need to change that. And especially after with the contest, it had to be a certain file limit. And
Oh,
originally I cut out so much of this first chapter, so much. It hurt. And then after I dropped out of it, I was like, guess what's coming back?
all the
But
things
I
I've
didn't
put.
want it. But I didn't want it to drag on. So I had to again go in and I had to edit and paste the story a little bit, and it actually worked. One of the last updates, I think part 4, that originally wasn't going to be in the contest, but it works. It works
Got
in
it.
the story.
Is it tough to Is it tough outside of the contest? Because you said it was heartbreaking to cut things out. Is it tough in general just to be like, okay, this doesn't progress the story, or do you just focus on what progresses the story
I
as
try
far
to
as your writing goes?
I try to see what progresses the story as much as possible. Then there's times I'll edit stuff and I'll add stuff, but I try to make sure the story is moving at all costs. And a good rule of thumb, if it is boring for you to draw, it's going to be boring for others to read. So you
Good.
got to go in and find out what's going on there.
I like that statement very much. If it's boring for you to draw, it's going to be boring for the reader.
Mhm.
How much of it do you have like the reader in mind, and how much of it is this is what I like, this is what's staying?
Probably more of what I like, but I try to take into consideration what. Actually, I really don't. I I'm true to the statement where I'm gonna draw what I like, and if you like it, that's awesome. Come on this journey with me. If you don't, there's the door. You don't you don't have to follow me. You're not obligated to follow me, and I'm not asking you to follow me. If you like what I'm doing, cool. If you don't, but I do like seeing how others react to the story. But if people dig what I'm working on, and the story that I'm into and I'm trying to portray, it's awesome because a lot of times that's the stuff I read. Like
Mhm.
I like the supernatural fantasy stuff. So hey, again, I'm not going to read a superhero comic.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah.
and that makes complete sense. And plus, I feel like if you're writing something that you enjoy, the people that enjoy it will enjoy it as well, you know what I mean?
That's
Whereas if you're
that's
focusing on something
it.
that, that's not, like you said, if it's boring to you, it's gonna be boring to them. And it's
Mhm.
the same as the reverse. If it's exciting for you, it will be exciting for them as well. So
Yeah.
so you being somewhat new to all of this and the first time officially doing your Kickstarter, what advice would you give yourself if you could go back in time, let's say 2 years ago?
Be patient. Be patient. Keep growing. You're never going to stop growing. Just be patient. Don't push too hard, and don't get in your head. Don't get in your head, and
I
don't
I
listen. Don't listen to those thoughts.
yeah. I think that's true for everyone. I think
Mhm.
there isn't a person that doesn't really get into their own head, and if they say otherwise, I feel like they're lying.
Yeah.
Because we tend to talk ourselves out of the things we actually want to do for whatever reason, whether it's fear, anxiety, or self-doubt, creeping in. So I like that one. Don't get into your own head. So
Yeah.
so the Kickstarter kicks off November 1st. Tuesday.
Mhm.
If anybody wants to follow you, what are your socials? And I'm gonna put the link for the Kickstarter in the description for everybody.
Yep. I'm Kamorian King. I'm on Instagram and I'm on Twitter. I'm more active on Twitter.
Okay.
Twitter is easier to be more active. I'll just put it that way.
I
But
heard.
I'm on both. You know, I try to check updates. I try to update on both. I share a little too much on Twitter sometimes. But Twitter allows me to share like whips and works in progresses and stuff when it feels like Instagram is like more of a portfolio.
Yeah.
So that's usually what I try to tend to do is just work with Instagram being more of a portfolio than, you know, hey, I'm throwing a bunch of sketches up here, or this is what I've been working on, yada, yada, yada. You know, if you want me to spam you, I'll do it on Twitter. So whatever.
Perfect. Yeah. So, like I said, I'm gonna put the link of the Kickstarter in the description. We've come to the end of our show. I've had such a blast talking to you. You have been like a pleasure. It really has been super fun. I didn't, we've talked here and there, and I didn't know what to expect, and it's been a pleasant surprise. And I definitely would love to have you on the show again,
I'd love
for
to.
the either later on once the Kickstarter is done and you've had your success, and or for the next Kickstarter whenever the virtual doors open for you.
I would love to be back on, you know. This is a whole new experience for me. This is my second podcast. So
Oh, let's do the podcast tour. Let's do it. I'm ready for it. That's
mhm.
amazing. So thank you so much. Let me wrap up the show and I'll be right back with you. Well, thank you everybody for stopping by and tuning in. Like I said, the link to the Kickstarter will be in the description. Go get it, go back it. It's such a great story. It's definitely something you haven't read before. I can guarantee that. And I will also put the links to all her socials down below. And until later, guys. Bye everyone.